Hey, everyone! Buckle up for an incredible story that'll tug at your heartstrings and keep you hooked till the end. This is Dark Voices, bringing you tales that surprise and inspire. Let's dive in. Kid, are you okay? Why are you crying? Addison asked with concern. She was currently at the mall to buy an umbrella because it was raining outside. My dad scolded me in front of so many people. I just wanted him to buy me some ice cream, the little girl said between sobs. Addison gently rubbed the child's back to calm her down. Where is your dad? She asked. He's over there, talking to my mom right now, the girl pointed to her father, who was currently busy on his phone call. Can you believe what happens next? Stay with Dark Voices to find out how a simple mix-up sparks an unforgettable journey. Addison took a few steps closer when she noticed the man had just ended his call, which gave her a chance to speak. Excuse me, sir, with all due respect, but it wasn't right for you to scold the child in front of so many people. You might end up traumatizing her. If you really couldn't afford to buy what she wanted, you should have talked to her gently instead of scolding her right away, Addison said firmly to the man. He frowned at her. Miss, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't. I'm saying your child is crying because you scolded her, Addison explained further. The man shook his head. Miss, I don't have a child. You must be talking to the wrong person, he corrected her. Addison was about to answer him when the little girl approached them. He's not my dad. That's my dad over there, the girl pointed to the man right next to him, who was still busy talking on the phone. The moment Addison heard that, she felt as though cold water had been poured over her head. She felt terribly embarrassed and quickly turned back to Cameron, the man she had mistaken for the child's father, but she forced a little smile to hide how flustered she felt. I'm so sorry, sir. I thought you were her dad, Addison apologized to him. It's all right, Mississippi. What matters is that you didn't slap me, he said, one eyebrow raised in a half-teasing remark. I would never do that, Addison said with a laugh, though she was still nervous. What's going to happen when Cameron kneels down to comfort the girl? Keep listening to Dark Voices for a twist you won't see coming. She noticed him suddenly bend down on one knee in front of the child so he could speak to her. Why are you crying? Cameron asked the girl gently. I just wanted my dad to buy me some ice cream, but he got mad at me, the girl answered between sniffles. Cameron lightly patted the girl's head before he spoke again. What flavor of ice cream do you like? I'll get it for you, he said with a smile, which brightened the girl's face. Really? I want cookies and cream, the little one exclaimed excitedly, now smiling. All right, that's what I'll buy. Stay right here, and I'll be right back, Cameron said. When he stood up, he and Addison exchanged glances. Miss, I'll go buy the girl some ice cream, and hopefully you won't get me mixed up with anyone else this time, he added before leaving them. Once Cameron had gone off to buy ice cream, Addison went to talk to the girl's real father. She spoke to him in a calm yet firm manner, pointing out that what he did to his daughter was hurtful. The father apologized to his child when he realized he was in the wrong. When Cameron returned with the ice cream, he handed it to the little girl, whose face lit up as though she'd just won the lottery. Thank you so much. It's been a long time since I've had ice cream, the child said happily. Her father also apologized to both Addison and Cameron before leaving with his daughter, waving goodbye as they walked away. Now that the two of them were alone, Addison turned to the man. Thank you for making the little girl happy, she said. You made her happy too, miss, because her dad realized how wrong he was, Cameron replied. But before he left, he pointed to Addison's chest area. What? She asked, confused. Your top button is undone, he said, which made her jump. She quickly looked down and realized two buttons on her collared blouse had come undone, slightly revealing her cleavage and part of her bra. She noticed Cameron move closer, then turn around to shield her from anyone else's view. Fix your buttons, he told her, his back still turned. Addison immediately did so. She wondered whether the buttons had been undone for a while or if it had just happened. Once she fixed them, she spoke again. Okay, I'm decent now. You can turn around, she said. Cameron faced her and just nodded. She was about to thank him, but he walked off without another word. Addison could only rub the back of her neck, feeling a little silly. Having bought her umbrella at the mall, Addison made her way to work. She was employed as an attorney at a law firm. Once upon a time, becoming a lawyer was just a dream, but now she was finally living it. "Addison, what are you planning to do after work today?" asked her friend and colleague Chloe, who was also an attorney. "I'm going home." "Why do you ask, Chloe?" Addison replied. "Home again? That's all you ever do, home and work. Why don't you come out with me tonight?" "Fiona's planning on having a little get-together at her place," Chloe said, trying to convince her. "Sorry, Chloe, I'm not in the mood to go out for drinks right now." "Maybe next time," Addison answered. "That's exactly why you still don't have a boyfriend," Chloe teased. "All you ever do is go to work and stay home." Addison simply laughed and shook her head, then turned her attention back to the pile of case files on her desk. The next day, Addison woke up early to do some grocery shopping. It was Sunday, and her fridge was practically empty. She was walking along the sidewalk, still a distance from the nearest bus stop, when two thieves on a motorcycle suddenly snatched her sling bag. The shock made her scream for help, but the street was empty. There was no one around. She had no choice but to move to the middle of the road, frantically waving to stop an oncoming car. The car screeched to a halt in front of her, and its driver stormed out, clearly annoyed. But to Addison's complete surprise, it was none other than Cameron. The two of them were equally shocked to see each other again. "Miss, it's you. Yesterday, you mistook me for some responsible dad, and now you're suddenly jumping in front of my car. What on earth are you doing in the middle of the road? Are you trying to get yourself run over?" Cameron snapped at her. But instead of answering, Addison grabbed his car keys right out of his hand. "I'm sorry, but I need to borrow your car for a moment," she said and hopped into the driver's seat. Before she could start the engine, Cameron climbed into the passenger seat. She could feel how upset he was, but she had no time to argue. She started the car and sped off in an attempt to catch the thieves who had stolen her bag. Fortunately, they weren't far, so she caught up to them quickly. "Look, miss, do you have any idea that I'm supposed to get married today? My fiancé is waiting for me at the church," Cameron said in exasperation. Addison, focused on the road as she closed in on the thieves, felt a stab of guilt when she noticed that Cameron was wearing a formal wedding suit. "Oh, I'm sorry. I had no idea." "Well, congratulations in advance." "I hope you and your wife have a long, happy marriage," she replied, eyes fixed on the motorcycle up ahead. At her response, Cameron squeezed his eyes shut in frustration, then turned to her. "So, what if my wedding doesn't happen because of you? What if my bride walks out and leaves me at the altar? Would you be willing to be my new bride?" he asked seriously, catching Addison off guard. She let out a startled laugh. "We literally just met, and now you're asking me if I'd be willing to be your replacement bride," she asked incredulously. "Don't worry, I'm not hitting on you. I just really need my car back," Cameron shot back, gripping the door as Addison rammed the motorcycle gently, causing it to skid and topple over. Addison jumped out of the car to retrieve her bag, ignoring the two thieves sprawled on the pavement. "You lowlives, if you're struggling financially, you shouldn't resort to illegal activities. Get a real job instead of stealing," she shouted, her anger flaring as she snatched the bag. Both men, injured from their fall, were too dazed to protest. Addison called the police, and within minutes, officers arrived to arrest the thieves. Once it was just Addison and Cameron left by the roadside, she turned to him. "Thank you for letting me borrow your car. I finally got my bag back. I'm really sorry for ruining your wedding day. If you need a lawyer, call me. I'll help you. Here's my card," she said, handing him her business card. Cameron took it, frowning a bit as he read the card. "So, you're an attorney?" he asked, and Addison nodded. "Yes. Now, please go find your fiancé. She might get tired of waiting," she said. She was about to walk away when he grabbed her arm. "I'm sorry, counselor, but I think I need your help right now," he said, holding onto her. Addison had no choice but to get back in the car, though this time Cameron was the one driving, while she sat in the passenger seat. They ended up stuck in traffic, which caused an even bigger delay. By the time they reached their destination and the car finally stopped, Addison realized they had arrived at a church. "Why did you bring me here? If your bride and her guests see me, they might get the wrong idea," Addison said as they got out of the car. But instead of answering, Cameron grabbed her hand and led her inside. Addison didn't expect to see what was waiting for them, a completely empty venue. "Why is there no one here? Didn't you say your wedding was today?" "Maybe we're at the wrong church," Addison wondered aloud, noticing that the place was deserted. Moments later, two older people approached them. "Cameron, why are you only just showing up? Did you know how long we've been waiting?" The guests laughed, and the bride walked out, thinking you weren't coming. "You do realize you need to get married so you can inherit your grandma's estate, right?" That was her last wish, the older woman snapped at Cameron. "Calm down, Alexandra. We're in a church. Let's listen to our son's explanation," said the older man gently. As Addison watched them talk, she realized these were Cameron's parents. "Don't worry, Mom, Dad. The wedding will still happen, but with a different bride," Cameron announced, his tone unwavering, before looking at Addison. Her eyes went wide at his words. She'd already been robbed earlier, and now she felt even more blindsided by this unexpected twist. Still in shock, Addison turned to Cameron's parents with a forced smile. "Excuse me, sir, ma'am, I'd like to talk to your son for a moment," she said, pulling him outside by the arm. Once they were outside, she planted her hands on her hips and glared at him. "Did I hear you correctly just now? You want me to be your replacement bride?" she asked, incredulous. "As I told you earlier, counselor, if my wedding falls apart, you'll be responsible," Cameron said firmly. Addison gulped, suddenly feeling more nervous than she had even in the face of those thieves. In fact, her nerves now were worse than they had been back on the road. "Yes, it's my fault you missed your wedding. I'm sorry, but here's a better idea, let me talk to your fiancée so she'll understand the situation. Then we can reschedule the wedding and fix everything," Addison reasoned. Cameron didn't waver. "It has to happen today." "Don't worry, counselor, it's just a marriage contract for 3 months, after which we'll file for an annulment," he explained. Addison's eyes flicked back to him. "A contract marriage," she echoed. "Yes, you'll also receive $15 million if you agree to be my bride. You'll be helping me out, and you'll be compensated in return," Cameron added, making Addison's eyes go wide. She certainly hadn't expected money to be involved. That was a huge sum, and it would settle her conscience too if she made amends. She faced Cameron with renewed resolve. "All right, I'll do it. I'll be your bride," Addison declared in a clear voice. And so, they went through with a ceremony neither of them had planned, exchanging vows at the altar unexpectedly. Cameron's grandmother, who loved surprising people, gifted them a house in the countryside as a wedding present. "My dears, why don't you spend your honeymoon there? It's so lovely in that area. You might even end up having twins, then I'd get 2 grandchildren at once," the older woman said, laughing good-naturedly. Addison's cheeks burned at Grandma's suggestion. She nearly choked on the water she was drinking. It was only yesterday that they got married, and now they were at Cameron's grandmother's home, eating together at a long dining table. "Oh, by the way, you don't need to worry about plane tickets. I already bought them. Your flight to the countryside leaves tomorrow," Grandma added. Addison was so shocked that she started coughing, which made Cameron quickly hand her a glass of water and gently rub her back. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I'm fine," Addison managed to say. "I'm sorry if I surprised you, dear. I'm just excited for you and Cameron to spend your honeymoon there. Who knows, maybe you'll have twins right away," Grandma said with a mischievous smile. "I just wasn't expecting we'd have to leave so soon," Addison answered, her voice still shaky. "Once you arrive at your new home, I hope you find genuine happiness and love as husband and wife. You might face challenges, but I believe you'll get through them," Cameron's grandmother added with warmth. Addison frowned a little at the cryptic comment. After dinner, Cameron drove Addison back to her own house. She climbed out of the car in a daze. A few seconds later, Cameron got out as well, placing a hand on her arm so that she turned to look at him. Addison, I'm sorry. I had no idea about Grandma's plan for us to leave tomorrow either. I was just as surprised as you were. But don't worry, I promise we'll come back right after our 3-month stay there so we can process the annulment. Think of it as a vacation, he said, sighing. Addison exhaled slowly. I'm just startled, that's all. But don't worry, I'm not backing out of our agreement, she said, prompting a small smile from Cameron. Thank you, Addison. Early the next day, Addison packed a large suitcase because they were leaving so early. She only had time to call her co-worker Chloe at the law firm. What do you mean you'll be gone for 3 whole months? Where on earth are you going, and why 3 months? Why not a year while you're at it? Chloe exclaimed in alarm. I know. Our team leader might not be too thrilled when I get back, Addison said, trying not to panic. Inside the plane with Cameron, Addison was still processing that they had just left the bustling streets of New York behind. She had no clue what awaited them in the countryside, but she was determined to make the most of it. At least for the next 3 months, she'd treat it like a vacation. By the time they arrived at the property Grandma had given them, the sun was beginning to set. Addison stared in disbelief, her hand flying to her mouth at the sight of a massive, rundown house. No way, this can't be the right place, Cameron. We must have the wrong address, Addison said, shaking her head as she took in the old, abandoned mansion that lacked both electricity and internet. She suddenly wondered whether she was stepping into some kind of horror story. Towering trees surrounded the property, and there was not another house in sight. Cameron was similarly stunned. Let me call Grandma. She must have given us the wrong address, he said, fishing his phone out of his pocket. He tried dialing several times, but each attempt failed. No signal, he said grimly. Hearing that, Addison put a hand to her forehead, then suddenly burst out laughing. Why are you laughing, Addison? There's nothing funny about our situation, Cameron said, annoyance creeping into his voice. I don't know. Your grandmother sure has a sense of humor. She gave us a wedding present that looks like it's straight out of a ghost story, an abandoned house with no electricity, no internet, surrounded by huge trees. Who knows, maybe there are ghosts roaming around here at night, Addison teased, giggling. She even noticed Cameron take a small step back at the mention of ghosts. Gigi ghosts, he asked, stuttering. Cameron, behind you. Addison suddenly shouted, making him jump and dart to her side, only to find a frog hopping around. Addison broke down laughing. It's just a frog. Wow, you sure are jumpy, she teased. Cameron eyed her sternly. Are you messing with me, Addison? He asked. I'm not messing with you. You're just easily startled, she said, still chuckling. Before they could argue further, Cameron let out a weary sigh. Let's get out of here before nightfall, okay? Leave? We're already here. It would be a waste to turn back now. This place might be a little scary, but it's still Grandma's wedding gift. We should at least try to appreciate it. Who knows, it might end up being an adventure, Addison said with a smile. Cameron gave a short laugh. You're calling it an adventure to stay in a place with no electricity or internet, Addison? How are we supposed to live here? He asked, sweeping his gaze over the property. I've lived that way before, Cameron, she said. We were poor, and I'm used to not having fancy utilities. Maybe it sounds impossible to you because you've never tried, but who's to say something amazing won't happen in a place like this, she added, emotion coloring her voice. Cameron looked like he wanted to retort, but stopped when they suddenly heard the faint sound of a child crying inside the old mansion. Addison noticed Cameron stiffen. The sky was growing dark, and the air felt chilly. Did you hear that? It sounds like a little kid is crying inside the house, Addison whispered. Yes, I hear it too, but how can there possibly be a child in there? Cameron asked, sounding anxious. She saw him dart straight for the driver's seat of the car, but she grabbed his arm before he could jump in. He nearly yelped. Cameron, I still hear crying. That child might need our help. Let's go check, Addison insisted, tugging him along. He had no choice but to follow her inside, though he was visibly trembling. The interior was pitch dark, so they used their phone flashlights. Old furniture was everywhere, coated in dust and cobwebs. Large framed portraits hung on the walls, each more intriguing than the last. "I think these must be the mansion's original owners. Too bad no one ever took care of the place after they were gone," Addison remarked. She noticed Cameron staying so close that they were practically glued together. "There's that crying again, Addison," Cameron muttered shakily. The sobbing grew louder as they approached what looked like a kitchen. Once there, they saw a little girl hiding under a long wooden table. Addison was about to approach the child when Cameron grabbed her arm. "Wait, Addison, she might not be human," he whispered, eyes wide. "She just spoke, Cameron," Addison pointed out, rolling her eyes. "If she's talking, she's very likely a human. If anyone here isn't human, it might be you," Addison quipped, moving closer. "Sweetheart, why are you inside this old house, and why are you crying under the table?" Addison asked gently. "Because my dog died yesterday," the little girl replied, her voice trembling with grief. Addison rubbed the child's back. Meanwhile, Cameron stood near the table, so on edge that when he felt a tap on his shoulder, he nearly jumped out of his skin. Turning around, he was shocked to see a woman in a white dress, her face heavily powdered, her hair long and loose, like some ghostly figure. "Sir Cameron, it's me, Mrs. Mills, your old housekeeper in New York. I'm sorry if I scared you," she said, scratching her head sheepishly. "Mrs. Mills, what are you doing in this abandoned house?" Cameron asked, stunned. "Your grandmother called me this morning and said you and your wife would be living here for a while, so she asked me to come help out," Mrs. Mills explained brightly. Addison, who had crouched beside the little girl, stood up. "Thank you for being here, Mrs. Mills. I'm Addison, by the way," she introduced herself, shaking the older woman's hand. "Oh, Ma'am Addison, you're so beautiful." "I'm not surprised Sir Cameron fell for you," Mrs. Mills gushed. "Really? That must be why, when we first met, he immediately asked for my number because he was so enchanted by my looks," Addison joked with a playful grin at Cameron, who looked flustered. "Mommy, are we staying here with them?" asked the little girl suddenly. "Oh, right. Sir Cameron, Ma'am Addison, this is my youngest daughter, Bella. I brought her along so she could enjoy a little break in the countryside," Mrs. Mills said, introducing the child. "I saw a lot of mango trees outside. Maybe we can pick some tomorrow." "Cameron, do you know how to climb a tree?" Bella asked with wide-eyed innocence. Addison, Mrs. Mills, and the little girl all waited for his answer. When Addison noticed Cameron hesitating, she answered for him. "Bella, I don't think Cameron knows how to," Addison began, but Cameron cut her off. "Oh, of course I do. We'll pick some mangoes tomorrow," he declared, making Bella grin with excitement. A few minutes later, they headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. There was no gas stove, so they used dry firewood to cook. Addison was busy rinsing a chicken in a basin. Cameron nervously realized he'd have to go out back to fetch more water, and it was already dark outside. "Is there no running water, Mrs. Mills?" he asked, trying not to sound alarmed. "None yet, sir, but don't worry, there aren't any ghosts that'll pop out at you back there, especially given how handsome you are," Mrs. Mills teased. Cameron didn't laugh. In fact, he looked even more scared. He hesitated by the back door, wondering if he should really fetch water alone. Addison was almost done slicing the other ingredients when Cameron suddenly grabbed her arm. "Come with me to get water." "You're finished with that, right?" he said, almost dragging her along. Addison laughed. "You just want company because you're scared to go out there, right?" she teased. "Yes, I'm scared, Addison, but if I'm going to be terrified, then you're coming with me," Cameron retorted, pulling her by the wrist. Addison could only shake her head and pick up a bucket. Outside, they managed to fill the bucket, and after dinner, Mrs. Mills showed them to their room on the second floor. "I cleaned this room a bit, but the rest of the house still needs work. At least you have a bed, a comforter, and 2 pillows. If you need light, there are some candles and matches over on that little table," Mrs. Mills explained. "Thank you," Cameron said, and Addison thanked her as well. "I'll leave you now so you can rest from your long trip. Have fun on your honeymoon, and I hope you two make a baby soon, Mrs. Mills added, winking before she closed the door behind her. Addison just shook her head, amused. She lit a candle, giving their room a faint, warm glow. There was a king-size bed, no fitted sheet, just an older comforter and a couple of pillows, but it was enough. Addison couldn't help blushing at the realization that she'd be sharing a bed with Cameron, a man she had known for only a few days. Suddenly, Cameron let out a yelp. Addison spun around to see him clutching her arm again as he jumped. He lost his balance, which caused him to tug her down onto the bed with him. Addison landed practically in his arms, her head against his chest. She immediately pulled back, her cheeks burning. "So, you're afraid of mice too," Addison teased, noticing he was startled by a small rodent scurrying along the floor. "Well, aren't you?" Cameron shot back. "Nope. I grew up with mice in the house. We also had a cat, so they tended to stay in their holes," Addison said with a grin. Cameron eyed her curiously. "So, what are you scared of?" he asked. Addison paused to think, but before she could answer, she suddenly felt something land on her face. She shrieked and, in her startled flailing, ended up on top of Cameron again. When she opened her eyes, she saw that she was practically straddling him. "I guess I don't need you to answer," Cameron said with a laugh. Addison tried to get up, but he held her waist to steady her. A jolt of unexpected electricity shot through her at his touch. "Stay still," he said, his voice somewhat urgent. "Huh? Why?" she asked, feeling her heart race. "The roach is on your head," Cameron replied, sounding anxious. "Oh God, please get it off before it crawls onto my face again," Addison nearly pleaded, eyes squeezed shut. But the roach scurried downward until it landed on her chest. Addison felt the tiny legs scuttling across her skin, and she shuddered. "Where is it now?" she choked. "It moved to your chest," Cameron said, his own voice shaky. "Hurry, get it, or it'll crawl into my shirt," Addison begged, still paralyzed by fear. Addison, if I try to grab it, I'll have to," Cameron started to say, but before he could finish, Addison simply tore off her blouse. The roach fell away, leaving Cameron speechless at the sight of her red bra. "Sorry, but you were taking too long," Addison said, tossing her blouse aside. She got off of him and fished for another shirt in her suitcase. Cameron remained in a stunned daze for a few moments. Finally regaining his composure, he stood up and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Addison asked. "I'm just stepping outside for some fresh air." "I'm not sleepy yet," Cameron muttered without meeting her eyes. Addison was about to protest, but he was already gone. She rolled her eyes. "Weird. He's going out there all alone, even though he was terrified of every little noise," she murmured, shaking her head as she changed into a clean shirt. The next day, they helped Mrs. Mills do a thorough cleaning of the house. It had been empty for years, so the work was extensive. They were all taking a brief rest on the old sofa when Mrs. Mills suddenly spoke up. "So, how was your first night here? I'm sure you enjoyed yourselves," she teased. Addison and Cameron both froze in the middle of their chores, remembering the chaos with the rodent and the roach. Addison awkwardly scratched her head. "It was fine, Mrs. Mills. Sorry if we made a lot of noise," she said. "Oh, don't worry. That's how it is on your honeymoon." "Can't blame you for being a little rowdy," Mrs. Mills teased again. Addison forced a laugh, knowing exactly what she meant. "How about you, Sir Cameron? Did you enjoy yourself last night?" Mrs. Mills added mischievously. Cameron coughed. Yes, I did," he said, blushing. "Oh my, Sir Cameron, you're stammering, and your cheeks are so red," Mrs. Mills observed. Addison noticed Cameron's flushed face, trying to keep it together. She teased him a little more. "He might still be thinking about last night, right, Cameron?" she said, which only made him clear his throat more aggressively. "If we keep talking about last night, we'll never finish cleaning," Cameron said, looking flustered. Addison and Mrs. Mills had to stifle laughs as they resumed their tasks. They finally finished cleaning, then collapsed on the couch once more. Mrs. Mills's daughter, Bella, suddenly approached, looking excited. Cameron, Addison, let's go pick those mangoes outside, she said eagerly. Addison popped up. Yes, let's. I'm in the mood for some fresh mango, she said, smiling at Bella. Cameron, make sure to pick a bunch. Bella, make sure you let Cameron pick plenty of fruit, Bella said brightly. So we can eat lots of mangoes, she added happily. Cameron rubbed the back of his neck before responding to the child. I can't promise too many, Bella, he said, causing her to look disappointed. Addison noticed the child's sadness and spoke up. Don't worry, Bella. Cameron and I will do our best to pick plenty of mangoes, right, Cameron, she said, widening her eyes at him to ensure he agreed. He could only nod, albeit reluctantly, since he had never climbed a tree before. He was definitely feeling the pressure now. This was shaping up to be one of the biggest challenges he had ever faced. A few moments later, they reached a large tree loaded with mangoes, which made both Addison and Bella smile, but Cameron immediately started sweating. This is going to be fun, Cam. So, start climbing, Addison said cheerfully, which made Cameron gulp. Go, Cameron. Bella cheered. After removing his shoes, Cameron tried to climb the tree. He was already dripping with sweat, and he hadn't even gotten that far off the ground. Addison, seeing how much he was struggling, stepped closer and placed a hand on his arm, making him stop and look at her. I know you've never climbed a tree, but I can see you're trying for Bella's sake. Let me go first so you can see how it's done, she said with a friendly smile, patting him on the shoulder. You know how to climb trees? Cameron asked in disbelief. Addison laughed at his surprised expression. Why wouldn't I? When I was a kid, I used to climb the big tree behind our house to pick mangoes too. My dad would sometimes be shocked to find all the branches empty, Addison said with a laugh. Your childhood sounds so simple but also fun, Cameron replied, smiling slightly. Cameron, Addison, are we still picking mangoes, or should I leave so you can keep talking? Bella teased, noticing the two of them chatting away. Addison and Cameron both laughed. Then Addison turned to Bella. Okay, Bella, I'll climb first, then Cameron can try after me, she said. Bella grinned and gave her an enthusiastic thumbs up. A moment later, Addison carefully made her way up the tree. She looked excited, almost like a child herself. She began picking mangoes and tossing them down to Bella and Cameron, who collected them below. Once she gathered a decent amount, Addison climbed back down. Your turn, Cameron. Just copy what I did. You might as well experience this now since you never did it as a kid. There's something about climbing a tree that feels incredible, she said with a grin, patting his shoulder. Cameron was just about to start climbing when Mrs. Mills suddenly appeared. So, this is where you've all been. That's a lot of mangoes already. Who climbed up? Mrs. Mills asked, eyeing the basket of fruit. I did, Addison replied proudly, raising her hand. I see. So, you can climb trees, Ma'am Addison. Are you climbing next, Sir Cameron? Mrs. Mills asked, noticing that he was about to do just that. Yes, ma'am. I'll climb so we can have more mangoes for everyone at the mansion, Cameron answered. Oh, well, do pick a bunch so you can get a kiss from Addison, Mrs. Mills teased. Both Addison and Cameron were caught off guard. They looked at each other in surprise. No need for a kiss from my wife, Mrs. Mills, Cameron said with a chuckle. Sir, why don't you want a kiss from your wife? Don't you agree, Ma'am Addison? Mrs. Mills replied, shifting her attention to Addison. Addison fell silent, uncertain how to respond. If she refused, Mrs. Mills might become suspicious, so Addison decided to play along. Sure, that's fine. He gets a kiss from me if he picks more mangoes than I did, Addison said with a nervous laugh. You heard her, Cameron. Time to do your best, Mrs. Mills said, clapping her hands in excitement. Cameron climbed the tree, and Addison was amazed at how quickly he managed to get up there, given he'd been struggling at first. Now it was Addison who felt slightly anxious, watching him up so high, picking mango after mango. Wow, Ma'am Addison, he's really going for it. He must really want that kiss from you, Mrs. Mills whispered with a giggle. Addison, meanwhile, felt her heart pound with worry that he might slip. Several minutes later, Cameron finished and began descending carefully. "Wow, Cameron, you picked a ton of mangoes," Bella said, clapping. "Let me count how many each of you got," Mrs. Mills said excitedly and started counting. Moments later, she turned back to Addison with a grin. "It looks like Cameron picked one more mango than you, Ma'am Addison, so that means he completed his mission. Time for his kiss," Mrs. Mills announced, making Addison's cheeks burn. Addison approached Cameron and noticed his wide smile. "I didn't know climbing a tree could be so easy." "It's actually fun," Cameron said, sounding triumphant. "You were pretty impressive. I guess you did your best just to get that kiss, huh?" Addison teased, raising a brow. "Well, is it so wrong for me to want a kiss from my wife?" he asked with a playful grin. Addison exhaled, stepped closer, and leaned in to kiss him on the cheek. Suddenly, rain began to pour, forcing her to stop midway. Mrs. Mills and Bella dashed back to the mansion, leaving them alone. "Let's get inside," Addison urged, grabbing Cameron's arm, but he stayed put, both of them getting soaked. "Where's my kiss?" he asked seriously. "Cameron, it's raining. We're already soaked, and you're still thinking about a kiss? Besides, Mrs. Mills is gone, so we don't have to," Addison began, laughing. But Cameron's face was unmoved. "A deal is a deal, Addison. You think climbing a tree was easy? I almost cut my arm on a sharp branch." "What? Really? Fine, close your eyes," she said with a smile. Cameron happily closed them, obviously anticipating the kiss. Neither of them seemed to mind the heavy downpour. "Open your eyes," Addison suddenly shouted. Cameron opened them and realized Addison had taken several steps away. She blew him a kiss from afar. "Hey, you wanted a kiss, right? Here's a flying kiss," she said, blowing him a series of playful kisses before quickly running off. Cameron could only place his hands on his hips and shake his head, a grin creeping onto his face at Addison's mischievousness. Addison sprinted through the rain, but a sudden burst of lightning startled her so much that she tripped and fell forward. "Way to go, Addison," she muttered, wincing at the sting in her knee after landing on a small rock. She tried to stand, letting out a hiss of pain. Then she heard Cameron's voice. "Addison, what happened? Are you hurt?" he asked worriedly, helping her up. "I just fell. That's what I get for not giving you that kiss, I guess," she joked through the discomfort. She turned to see Cameron pulling off his white t-shirt, revealing his well-built upper body. Before she could react, he knelt in front of her and tied the shirt around her bleeding knee to stop the flow of blood. Moments later, he turned his back to her. "Climb on. You hurt your knee, so you shouldn't walk," Cameron said. "Cameron, I'm fine. You don't need to carry me." "I'm heavier than you think," Addison protested half-heartedly. "Addison, even if you were heavy, I'd still carry you. You're my wife." "No way, I'd just leave you injured," Cameron replied. His words sent butterflies racing through Addison's stomach, and her heart started pounding almost as loudly as the thunder above. Instead of arguing, she let him carry her on his back. By the time they made it back to the mansion, the rain had begun to ease. In the days that followed, Addison and Cameron got to know each other better. They never imagined life in an old, abandoned house could be so peaceful and even fun. Addison had to admit Cameron was a good man, despite his fear of ghosts and mice. One afternoon, she found herself smiling as she watched him chopping firewood outside, shirtless, sweat dripping from his body. Addison walked over to him. "Here, use this towel. You're drenched in sweat, so wipe off before you keep going," she said, handing him the towel. Cameron paused, chuckled, and looked her in the eye. "Addison, could you be a little sweeter for a change? Mrs. Mills has been watching us for a while," he whispered, realizing they had an audience. Addison had no choice but to dab the towel gently across his forehead and then down over his chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she did so. She jolted when Cameron caught her wrist, making her stop. "Addison, I think you need to wipe your own forehead too," he teased softly. Addison hadn't noticed she was sweating as well. Maybe it's because you're it's hot out here, she blurted, fanning herself with her free hand, face burning from embarrassment. Soon came another day when they were washing clothes together. They had rigged up a makeshift clothesline in the yard. Cameron, ease up on the scrubbing. You're splashing water all over me, Addison complained, annoyed. You're going to shower later anyway, so you'll get wet either way, he answered calmly. Addison let out a sarcastic laugh, stood up abruptly, and scooped up a small bowl of water. Well, if I'm going to get wet no matter what, so can you, she said firmly, stepping closer to him. Seeing her approach, Cameron grabbed a whole bucket of water. Addison backed away in alarm. Don't you dare pour that on me, Cameron. You won't like what I do next, she warned. But he advanced anyway. Instead of soaking just Addison, he doused both of them. She gasped in surprise but couldn't help laughing the moment their eyes met. Unbeknownst to them, Mrs. Mills and Bella were watching through a window of the mansion. Mom, look at them playing with water like kids. Bella giggled. That's how people act when they're in love, Mrs. Mills said, smiling at her daughter. Wow, that's English, right, Mom? Could you say it in our language so I'll understand it better? Bella asked innocently, scratching her head. I'll explain it when you're older. Now let's go get you cleaned up, Mrs. Mills replied, picking Bella up.